right now the breaking news that in this major reversal, Disney will bring Jimmy Kimmel back. That is a long ways from how they sounded last week, and that will be tomorrow. Disney and ABC announcing Kimmel goes back on the air despite these government Trump efforts to silence him tomorrow. Here is the statement. I'm going to read you exactly what Disney said so you can make sense of it yourself. Last Wednesday, we made the decision, these Disney executives say, to, quote, suspend production on the show, referring to Kimmel, to avoid further inflaming a tense situation at an emotional moment for our country. They continue today, quote, we have spent the last days having thoughtful conversations with Jimmy. And after those conversations, we reached the decision to return the show on Tuesday. So that is the news, and that's how they're putting it. Of course, there's a lot more to this, and we're going to get into that right now. I'm curious, does this show that some amount of public pressure works?
Yeah, I think it shows quite clearly the resistance works. You know, this is a lesson that I think the American people understand. We saw with the No Kings protest. We saw with people canceling Disney Plus. But ever since Trump has been inaugurated in office, we have seen the elites in this country, the CEO class, take the opposite lesson. I do think that Bob Iger's decision to settle with Trump and give money to his presidential library in December of last year actually set a tone of elite submission that we have seen throughout media. We have seen it throughout academia. We've seen it with the law firms, et cetera. It's the actual regular Americans who have stood up and made a difference.
Howard?
I think that's exactly right. And, you know, that what Oliver, minus one word, had to say about bullies is exactly right. And the amazing thing to me is the cowardice of the huge corporations. And Iger is not known for that. And he, I think, finally realized that this was going to be a huge problem. But look at all the tech companies, which are gazillionaires. They're kissing Trump's you-know-what all the time. And that is not a winning strategy in the long run. And I think consumers just proved to Disney it was not a winning strategy.
Yes, and it clearly wrapped all of Disney in a choice that actually is just one small part of their empire, Che. And so on one hand, you could imagine corporate leaders who aren't looking for this fight and wrongly perhaps think they can get away from it to say, oh, this is just a little part, right? The actual amount of revenue for a late night show compared to Disney and the parks and everything and the Marvel movies is small. And yet what you both just referred to, a massive, righteous, and very clear backlash actually supersized it up to affect some other parts of Disney, Che.
Yeah, and the reality is that, you know, people talk about the broadcast TV model and how that's a small part of the Disney empire. What makes anybody at Disney think it's just going to end with Jimmy Kimmel? What's to stop after this? Donald Trump saying, you know, you guys own Star Wars. I would like Luke Skywalker to start looking like Don Jr. You guys are doing
or
this
at least
remake.
Che, or at least have an orange lightsaber in the mix.
Exactly, that's a great point. Or or have the Jedi Alliance wear MAGA caps now. I mean, you know, they could decide to dictate every element of Disney's business, the nature of the entertainment, who they hire at their theme parks. Maybe Trump says, hey, I want you to look through the social media of all your employees and get rid of those people who said bad things about me. You know, what we know is if you give bullies an inch, they take a mile. That is why, as Timothy Snyder pointed out, with authoritarianism, don't give an inch.
Yeah, and I don't know how often, Governor, that David Letterman and Ted Cruz agree on a comedic punchline or how to make a point. But they both attacked the Trump FCC as the mob. And this comes, of course, in the wider climate where that's not, what's the word I'm looking for? That's not hyperbolic because Donald Trump is literally threatening opponents, saying he wants his opponents silenced, indicted, jailed. Not because they've done any crime, but because of their free speech. So it's not like the Kimmel thing happens in a vacuum. Other people's free speech is being sanctioned with other things. And they both liken this to mob tactics. Here's Letterman. Take a listen, Howard.
Brendan Carr, yes. So this guy, the FCC, is we can do things the easy way, we can do things the hard way. Who is hiring these goons? Mario Puzo? The FCC, we're not happy until you're not happy.
Governor?
You know, the same thing is going on, interestingly, in the Democratic Party. The government shutdown is a perfect example of it. They raised the white flag the last time and let some ridiculous, awful bill through that's going to do a lot of damage to the public, especially including a lot of Trump voters in red states. And now they're saying, no, we're not, unless you include us in the negotiation and we can do something for these folks that we care about, we're not supporting you. And if the government closes, that's your problem. If you don't do that, there'll be more and more of this pushing people around. So this is a Trump tactic. He used it in business for years and years and years. He wasn't a particularly successful business guy, and this is not a particularly successful tactic as long as Americans remember who they are. And there's been a lot of Americans forgetting what America is about, and I think the Disney people learned the hard way that
the Trump administration is trying to make it even harder for reporters at the Pentagon to do their jobs of keeping us all aware of what the Defense Department is up to. NPR reports that going forward, journalists must sign a pledge not to gather any information, including unclassified reports, that has not been authorized for release. Those who fail to obey will lose their press credentials. Basically, don't do reporting. The National Press Club blasted the move, saying in a statement in part, quote, this is a direct assault on independent journalism at the very place where independent scrutiny matters the most, the U.S. military. Joining us now is Kevin Barron, president of Elevation Global Strategies and former executive editor of Defense One. He's also the former vice president of the Pentagon Press. Okay, Kevin, this strikes me as the most insane press policy I've ever seen coming out of the Pentagon, and that has to say something. Basically, they're saying don't report on anything that you find out because you're reporting in a motion that literally would have prevented all of the great accountability journalism that has happened over the years about our country going to war.
Yeah, I mean, if this policy stands, it's the death of American journalism at the Pentagon. It's nothing less than that. I covered the building for, more than 15 years. You live inside that place. And, it's a special place. It's a very unique job for journalists, even in Washington, for lots of reasons. The Pentagon is America's military headquarters. So any reporter that works there, and it's a small number of reporters in the American media ecosystem who have ever been able to have the privilege of being a Pentagon reporter. It's a small press corps, and there's not a lot of turnover. And the people that work there know, trust me, they know, I know, the seriousness with the duty that they're given. By reporting on the military, you're reporting on not just the leadership, the political leaders, but the senior military leaders themselves. And all the way down the chain of command through every level of troop you can think of. And it goes not just from that building, but around the world. When you're on the Pentagon Press Corps, you travel to military bases. And in our case, back in the day, it was war zones, combat outposts, forward operating bases. You go to foreign embassies. You go to NATO headquarters. You go onto ships. You travel in military aircraft, nuclear command aircraft, helicopters. So many places where your life is in their hands and vice versa. It's a very symbiotic relationship. There's a lot of trust that's built and required in it. All that to say, no president and no defense secretary have ever come close to having any kind of problem with the press corps that would require anything close to restricting the press corps' movements and actions like this. It's just beyond comprehension.
Despite the outcry, Pete Hegseth has actually been boasting about this, doubling down on it. He posted on X saying, quote, the press does not run the Pentagon, the people do. Is that true? So who represents the people in this equation? Is it Pete Hegseth, or is it reporters who come from all over the country who work hard to get the opportunity to get in there and ask questions on behalf of the communities they serve? For one of the few times I'll say this out loud, Pete Hegseth is right.
The American people elected this president, and this president chose this defense secretary, and the Senate GOP confirmed him. So this is the policy you get. It shouldn't be a surprise. You know, it would have been a surprise if they started with this back in February, but there have been a sequence of guidances that have come down from the defense secretary's office limiting press movements, targeting certain members of the press, certain organizations where they lost their seats, they lost their broadcast booths. All of these are moves that made it harder for reporters to report the truth, harder to get information that, like as Hegseth's statements say, is not pre-authorized and pre-approved. And like you said, at least harder to do journalism. So yeah, the Pentagon gets to set these rules, as do all the agencies. You know, at the State Department, it's different. The State Department, if you want to meet with someone and you're a reporter, or at least back in the day, maybe it's changed recently, you had to meet with them like at the cafe. You couldn't wander around the building wherever you want to, even on hallways, like you can at the Pentagon. You really can, until recently, if you have a Pentagon press pass, first of all, you've already been vetted to some level to get into the building and have that pass, and to have earned your job in the first place in journalism. But when you have that badge, you can walk all over the Pentagon. You can't walk into certain rooms that are already locked and have codes, and you need permission to go into, for sure. But it's actually part of the job of doing it. You have to walk around. I started as a Stars and Stripes reporter. You get there early in the morning, and you would make the rounds, meaning you go from your desk in the press room to the Army Public Affairs Office, the Navy Public Affairs, the Air Force. You go around the building, and that's just the basic of reporting, to go talk to people, to talk to public affairs officers, and anybody else you want to who's willing to talk to you.
I was going to say that maybe the silver lining in all this is that you don't have to do the reporting, because Mike Waltz or Pete Hegseth will put you on a signal chat and they'll just report to you all the military plans, and then you can report.
He's lost it. Donald Trump is crying like a tiny little baby because Jimmy Kimmel beat him. And now this is a double whammy for Trump, because few people, maybe there'll be some, I guess, there's 300 million Americans and billions of people in the world, right? More than 300 million Americans. But most people either supported what Trump did and are now going to be mad at him for backing down, or people who didn't support him aren't going to give him credit for this. He's not going to get credit for the back down. He's not going to get credit because, this didn't end up getting worse, right? ABC, Disney, all of that, the local affiliates, some of them might get forgiven, I suppose. But for the most part, Donald Trump spent political and personal capital on this story, using his direct control and his indirect influence on the FCC, which again, indirectly influenced stuff, to make this move, and it failed. So now everybody now knows that Donald Trump will try to remove his enemies from the air, and that if folks stand up, the public especially, but also other people involved in the media and government officials and what have you, if they stand up, the bully will back down. And now Kimmel has the opportunity to not only be victorious, but now has a real sense that that he's bigger than this. You know, he's not more powerful than the president, but he's powerful enough to stand up to the president when the president and his cronies do unjust things. This is going to be one of these moments that people look back on and say, when Donald Trump realized he did not have the absolute power, was when he took shots at everybody. And a lot of universities and law firms and individuals and government agencies, they bent the knee. But there was a moment where Donald Trump took a direct shot at free speech, free media, the First Amendment, and folks stood up. Folks stood up. Jimmy Kimmel stood up, yes, of course, but also other media figures. You folks like you guys, folks like myself, Democrats in Congress, and even a few Republicans in Congress. They stood up. And in that pressure, even the wannabe tyrant Trump could not resist. This is historic.